True Homes. And so today we just want to share our build opportunities and maybe some new communities as well. We love brokers. We always pay 3%. True Homes is very, very, very pro broker. We know that 80% of transactions happen with a broker. So True Homes does not want to cut you guys out, unlike other builders. So we pride ourselves in that. So right now, where we're at in Raleigh is on this side, and then I've got some pricing on the back, general pricing. We have our North District townhomes in Flowers Plantation, which is in Clayton. Those are in the 300s. Benson Village is brand new. We start in the low 300s there. Benson Village, those are quarter acre lots up. So we had one that was almost an acre. So if you want somebody with land, Benson's it. We just got started in our new Lake Royale community, Lewisburg area. We have about 65 lots. If you've been out there, I know you are. But they're sprinkled into the existing community already. We've got both lakeside and golf course side lots available. Those are in $299. So if you have somebody with a low price point and they want some land too, the lot that sold 2 days ago for a client build was 0.72 of an acre. So nice size lots out there with a low price tag too.
That's a question.
Yeah.
In that neighborhood, like, are the HOAs real strict there?
Justin would know. So yeah.
I mean, like, what are you?
My people want to eventually have like a little, not a tiny house, they want to build like a little structure.
Like
for
an
her
ADU?
mom to live in.
Oh, you can do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It is a POA, not an HOA, so it's a little bit different, but there's tons of amenities with that being said, and there is a gated side too. We've got lots on both sides, and so there's a lot of nice things going on out there. They've got putt-putt, they've got the golf course, of course, and then they've got like the grill, the pavilion, the beach. There's cool, like there's pickleball. There's a lot out there. So it's a really nice community and great lots, great price points. Lake Royale, yeah. And it, like I said, it's an existing community. We just have lots sprinkled in there. So, not a true community.
So would it be possible to add a second garage?
Yeah. So instead of garage.
Yeah.
So we actually have 3-car garage options out there too. Yep. Yeah, because the lots are bigger, so we can do it. Yep, as long as the lot can accommodate it. And then we've got Tanglewood, which is in Anger. Those are starting in the low 300s as well. We just started in our new Bowie's Creek townhomes, which is in Lillington. Those are right across the street from Campbell University. And so those start at $239. $239. Yes.
I'm assuming not, but any rental restrictions in that community?
So I don't even know. I don't know what the cap is, but we are allowing one investor per building.
Okay.
So investors are allowed. So obviously that would be in the cap, but the, $239 is the price point out there. So if you have an investor, let me know. And we pay 3% on top of that. So, and then finally, we just got started with our brand new Whitehall townhomes, which is in downtown Wendell. Those are walking distance to everything in like Main Street, Wendell. It's super cute, great location, 2,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 3.5 bathrooms. Great opportunity. Those are in the high 300s, around 360. And then coming soon is our Nathan's Ridge community in Lillington. Celine and I work in Flowers, so we are some Joco locals ourselves. So we're down the street. But the nice thing is with True Homes, just call us. You don't have to worry about like somebody the on-site over in Lewisburg, because we can help you with any community. If you're like, hey, Lauren, I've got this client looking for this, this, and this, we'll share with whatever may fit that criteria for that client. And then of course we can do builds as well. And so with that being said, those are not listed. Those do not exist yet because we're building it for a client. So if you're like, hey, I need a screen and porch, white cabinets, I need the owner suite down in the 300s with the quarter lot, send it to me because we can share what solution will work for them.
Yeah, if you look at this other printout that we have, it goes over some of the build opportunities that we have in Copper Ridge specifically. So we are the only builder in Flowers Plantation now that actually lets clients do any customization. We're the only builder in Flowers that's actually single family in general. But even our townhome community, if clients want to pre-sell into one of those buildings, they can go to Design Studio. Obviously, at that point, they can't make any kind of structural changes for townhomes, but if they wanted to, upgrade any kind of countertops, cabinets, backsplash, that kind of stuff, they can still go to Design Studio and kind of personalize some options. And we're the only builder out there doing that. We're actually the only builder doing that in most of the markets, because most of the production builders out there right now are just building homes and saying someone will buy it. But I'd say probably at least like 60% of what we do, at least in Copper Ridge, is client sales. Just because a lot of clients who are not priced out of this market and can buy with the interest rates the way they are today, they don't really want to compromise on a lot of things, and the market's still tricky for a lot of buyers. So people are coming to us and they're like, well, you know, I don't want to compromise on so much. I'm already signing up for a mortgage payment that's twice as much as what they were expecting, or something along those lines, but they want to get certain things. And a lot of times we can hit a lot of those price points because we are semi-custom. So we can build similar flowing floor plans that are smaller or larger, or kind of give them options to customize so they're not making as many compromises on their home. And we can go over those options. I think with new construction, a lot of the things that like realtors are like, oh no, they want to be in a house in the next like 3 months. And then what happens is a lot of clients don't find exactly what they're looking for. And it might be 3, 4, 5 months later, and they still are looking for a home. And for us, we can build in Copper Ridge. We're building in 5 to 8 months. Most of them are like 5 to 7 right now. So that's been a really good solution for a lot of people that we've been working with recently. Copper Ridge, we have homes that people can build starting at like 360, which is 4-bed, 2.5 baths, options to customize and kind of modify different things. And then we have actually a brand new floor plan that we added, which is the Gideon. It's 3,000 square feet. You can add a 3rd car garage, but the base price of that starts at $424,900. And that's been really popular as well. So we've got some really new floor plans. We've got some quick move-ins. Our ranch plan, the Bayside, which is popular, you can build and customize, but the quick move-in that we've got just had a price reduction. So that one's $387,400. Quick move-in stage looks beautiful. We allow brokers to host open houses if they want to ever sit on site on the weekend, and we'll advertise it in MLS. We have the flower signage that we could put out throughout the community, and just be available as a resource for you guys.
Yeah, biggest thing is True Homes wants to partner with you. Unlike other builders, we just want to work together because we know that reoccurring transactions will occur once we can figure out a way to partner. And so it's a win-win for both of us. And so if you guys are like, hey, I want to do an open house, I want to do a home buyer seminar, just let me know. We can figure it out. We'll buy food, we'll figure it out. And that's one thing that Selena and I love to do with brokers, is figure out a way that we can both win. And on top of that, True Homes will always pay 3%. I know the whole NAR thing is coming up right now. Scary. I know some nationals are already going backwards from what I've heard. They're already paying flat rate fees. True Homes will never step away from 3%. True Homes was started in 2007, which is the absolute worst time to be a new home builder. So we've always been 3%. Do know that. We will stay that consistently throughout. So let us know what you got. Happy to help and partner.
Have the cards and.
Yeah, on the flyer, our information is here as well, and then he's got the cards too.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Selena and Lauren.
Question.
Yeah. Mhm.
Did I hear you say that at Lake Royale it's a POA, not
Yes,
an
yes,
HOA?
yes.
What is a POA?
Property Owners Association. So Justin would probably be able to tell you a little more than I know because he's more familiar. We just got started there, but basically it's a property owners association.
It's not like not necessarily like a management company. It's the people who live in the community who are fully managing the expectations.
So they kind of like self-govern?
Yes.
They like outsource to a company in Charlotte. They just started doing that about a year ago. But the reason they have a POA is because not everyone out there is considered a homeowner. Because some of them are campers and they've built over. Like the southern part of the lake, and I'm just explaining this to you
Yeah,
here.
Yeah.
The
Please.
southern part of the lake is mostly residential. The northern part of the lake, that is all people who it's overnight and weekenders. And so they have like a camper and they build over like a porch and a roof over it. Or they take a park model, tiny homes. They've been around forever and they just call park models. They put a park model built onto it. And so those are considered like property owners, whereas the southern part of the lake is like homeowner. So that's why they just call it a POA to encompass everything. And some people just own a lot out there to be able to get discounted golf course fees. So they're like, I have a lot because it's cheaper to buy a lot and then.
That's, I like that. So look into that.
It's considered Lewisburg.
So we started at $2.99, or actually, is it $2.99? Yeah, it's $2.99, I believe, in Lake Royale. So the lots are gonna vary between like $10,000-15,000 on top of the base price. The bigger the lot, the bigger the base price. So I don't recall exactly what the 0.7 one was, but I know we have another one coming up that's like 0.3, so.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think when we first released, we had a $0 lot premium, but it just
Yep.
depends. It's the only neighborhood for us, which is a little bit different, that like we have lots within that community. So we don't have one section of that community. The lots are kind of spread throughout Lake Royale, which is a
Yeah.
little bit different, which is
Yeah.
why there's such like a variance on the
Yeah.
lot pricing.
Yeah.
Based off size and where it's at.
All right, thank y'all.
Thank you so much.
All right, we are gonna talk due diligence now. For those on Zoom, we can hear you just as well as you can hear me, so please feel free to participate. I encourage participation. My style is more mastermind style, as those who have been in my classes before. And we're joined today, don't know this lady here, Miss April Stevens. So I wanted to do this class on due diligence for two reasons. The first reason is because of what's going on with the NAR ruling and that, you know, where we're gonna have to start really showing our value to buyers when we're sitting down with them at our buyer consultation. And I mean, for lack of a better word, scare them into, you know, by giving them this information and having scripts and objection handlers of why, you know, just by going through the due diligence process, all the stuff that you as a buyer, because we are in a caveat emptor state, meaning the sellers don't have to disclose anything. So, you know, the burden is on the buyer. So really arming your buyers with, hey, you have this long list of stuff that you have to do. Like I said, not for lack of a better word, scaring them and making them realize that they need you. They need you to guide them through this process.
They
And
need to know what their rights are as well.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, even to the fact that I'll look at a buyer sometimes and say, hey, you know, we're gonna do our due diligence, and they look at me when I use that term, you know, sideways. So I mean, even that term is a scary term for buyers. The other reason I like doing, or I wanted to do this class is because I also want people to share their experiences during due diligence, because that's how I feel you can best form your objection handlers to, oh, you know what, I don't want to spend the money on that septic inspection, or, you know, do I really need a survey? You need those horror stories, whether they're your own or your brokerages or your friend that's an agent, to say, well, you know what, let me tell you what happened to me. You know, I have some personal ones that when I purchased a home that, you know, I went through all the steps and they found things that would have cost me quite a bit of money. So you need those stories for the, well, why do I need this? Well, let me tell you what happened to me or a buyer of mine, or, you know, another agent at my office, this crazy story about, you know, a fence that was 50 feet over the line, or, you know, a septic tank had a crack in it. So please feel free, you know, as we're going through these, to share your experiences, crazy things that happened, because that's why I love doing masterminds, is I can learn from you all just as much as you can learn from me and April, and, you know, anybody regardless of experience level, because every single transaction is different.
You're giving me heart palpitations right now, because I just realized the one I have under contract, they declined the survey and the septic inspection. I'm like, you know, I'm gonna revisit that with them after this class.
Yeah. And the good part is that it's all spelled out for you. This is the offer to purchase, and this is also the same verbiage that's in the buyer agency agreement. And under number 4, it starts talking about the buyer's due diligence process, and it literally spells out what North Carolina thinks every buyer should be doing, you know, during their due diligence process. And we'll just kind of start going through some of these and start talking about them. I do want to start out, has anybody ever helped a buyer that did not get a home inspection?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, please tell me how. I was hoping that everybody was like, no, I would never let that happen. But how did that go?
So they put an offer on like 2 different properties. So they had already paid for home inspection twice inside the back house. So this was a third go around. And the man, he was a contractor with something, and he didn't feel like he needed a home inspection a third time. So he was like, asked him, would it be okay? I ran it past him. I said, he doesn't want to do a home inspection. He says he wants to inspect itself. And then, you know, let you know, like after he does his own, you know, looking around.
Okay.
And sellers were fine with that. And so sellers agent was fine until
Until ...
Until he submitted a report, almost like a real home inspection report, where he had pictures. I thought, you know, when I looked at it, I thought, oh, you went the extra mile, but they did not like that. They were like, who does he think he is? Coming in here, acting like he's pretending to be a home inspector with a bunch of pictures and saying this and that is wrong and da-da-da. And it was just like one thing that was really like concerning, but they were just not willing to do, and it was something that was like a less than $1,000 fix.
Mhm.
And I had to fight for that because they were just like outraged at the fact of how it came to them, how the information was presented to them, that they didn't even want to give $1,000. And even the listing agent was like, you can just have them back out at this point because we're not gonna do nothing. And if they wanna back out because we're not gonna do it, then let them, you know, when this after. And it was like a hard time, but we ended up closing that deal. We made it work. But yeah, that was a time where he was just like, I've already paid home inspections for things that they backed out of on the
Yeah.
report. And they were just not wanting to pay for another one. And he thought like he could do it.
Yeah.
And not saying the job was bad, but it was the way it was, you know, presented.
Yeah. That's
I've
interesting.
had that happen on the listing side, and myself and the sellers were kind of like, you can give us as many reports as you want, but this person doesn't have a license. They have not gone through the training to be able to identify if these things are actually problems. So I can totally foresee that. And this is do as I say, not as I do. My very first house, I did not have a home inspection on. Same thing, I had my uncle go through and look at it. It was new construction. It should be fine. I wasn't a licensed agent at that time. I was 20 and didn't have the money to spend on a home inspection. My roof proceeded to leak for the next 4 years. Ruined my ceiling, ruined my dining room furniture. When I tell you it was one thing after another, finally I was like, I'm not having the builder's roofer back out. I'm getting an independent roofer to come out. And what had happened is in the final stages of the roof, I learned more about this than I ever wanted to. Somebody had stepped on the plywood in the wrong place and it created a hole in the plywood. So they could replace the roof all they wanted to, but somehow water was still getting in and it was running down one of the rafters. And so it was constantly spreading all the way across my kitchen and dining room, and they could not figure out where it was coming from. And it was because the water will find a way to the lowest point, and it had found this break in the plywood and constantly kept running down that way. So I use that example as a don't be like me.
Yeah, new construction, so little sidebar, new construction still, I would highly recommend, same as April, your foundation, pre-drywall, and then final. It's as simple as if you have a go-to inspector and you're having pushback from a buyer about getting a new construction, just simply talk to your inspector, say, hey, can you send me over a obviously personal stuff blacked out, or just a couple examples of things you found in new construction homes, because ultimately these are humans and they're all different from different trades.
Working with working with natural materials.
Yeah, and I've never had a clean new construction inspection pre-drywall. They'll find something,
The other thing you can do is check the permit sites, especially on Johnson and Wade County. They're very easy to research now, and you can see everything that has failed on a new construction inspection. So, I know this because I had a couple that were in framing, and the framer, I don't know where they came from, but they did not know what they were doing. And there were multiple missing load points. And it finally took the head of inspections coming out and going, this is a problem. And he could show me like where there was no load point whatsoever for part of the second floor. Cause we were getting frustrated because everything was getting delayed because it kept failing. And I was like, what is going on? And I'm thinking the inspection department's being too nitpicky. And it was this just line of framers that were doing this on multiple houses. So, pay attention to that, especially on the buyer agent side too, because the building inspectors are very good, especially in Johnson County. I can vouch for them, but they're not perfect either.
And they have a lot to inspect.
Heavy workload right now.
Yeah.
So if you see a house has multiple failures, I would absolutely use that as leverage to have your buyers do a pre-drywall inspection, framing inspection, and even now they have infrared inspections, which from a seller's side, of course, I'm like, wow, that's really extra. But for a buyer's side, I'm like, how many times do we know that insulation wasn't missed in walls and things like that before the sheetrockers came? Because
Yeah.
if you've ever watched a new construction house go up, it gets framed, it gets sheetrocked. Insulation happens in like 24 hours. And so there is a lot of room for error, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. So on my personal, when I'm advising buyers, it's always home, HVAC, termite, radon, septic, if it has septic, survey, all that stuff, you know, that we all should be advising our buyers to get. In the actual verbiage under inspections, this is what North Carolina says. It says it's not limited to this, but just a few things they included in here were determine the condition of any improvements on the property, the presence of unusual drainage conditions, or evidence of excessive moisture adversely affecting any improvements on the property, the presence of asbestos, existing environmental contamination, wood destroying insects or damage, and the presence or level of radon gas on the property. So they kind of didn't directly say get the home inspected, but they also kind of, you know, did some things that you wouldn't really think about. Oh, should we, you know, check the drainage around the house? Or, you know, with my current house, I would almost advise if you have a buyer under contract during due diligence, make sure they go out to the house during a rainstorm, after a rainstorm, see where the water's piling up in the yard. Cause I have areas in my yard that's holding water now that, you know, they never told me that.
Now, for the record, industry standard that is that the water can stand in a certain place in the yard for 48 hours. After 48 hours, it needs to be evaluated. If it's still there after 72 hours, then there probably is a major issue, unless it was just a really unconventional amount of rain that fell.
Yeah.
And if y'all don't have this in your buyer agent presentation, you should add it. Seeing the inspections to expect to pay for and approximate cost for those, because when you're hitting them with so much, and this is why they tell us no, because we're in the middle of the process and they've just given us the due diligence check and they've just given us the earnest money check. And then we're like, okay, how many more checks would you like to write? Because now I'm going to hit you with this, you see how this feels like, wow, we could get hit with something. And so they're like, no, I probably don't need that. No, I probably don't need that. Have this conversation before you ever write the offer, because if they're on limited funds and they just gave you all $3,000 in their savings for due diligence and earnest money, now all of a sudden inspections aren't that important to them. And we know how important they are, but it's hard for them to understand that because they haven't been through what we've seen.
Yeah, I call it the hidden costs of buying a home. Obviously, if they've spoken to a lender, they've talked about down payment. They've talked about closing costs possibly. Rarely the lender ever talks about a due diligence fee or earnest money deposit or the costs of the inspection. So I say, you know, these are the hidden costs that you don't realize that you're going to have to pay for throughout the due diligence process. And, you know, I don't want to know your personal finances, but I need to know that you have this extra money set aside. So we don't get to a point where you said, I can't do that because it could cost you more later. So,
and it's also good to find out from their lender how many of those costs can be rolled in so that they can get credits back for those. If you are negotiating some seller paid closing costs, incentives, things like that, a lot of times they can get paid back for those items. And some of our inspectors will hold it till closing. Not many do anymore. We used to do it all the time. And you can imagine that didn't go over well all the time when, especially now that due diligence is a thing and people are out their money, the last thing that they want to do is pay a inspector for finding all the things that made them want to walk away and lose their due diligence money, which is why it's so important to get their professional services and disclosure statement signed, because it also covers you that you're not responsible for paying them, which I've bought a couple home inspections in the past and termite inspections because sellers refused to pay and I didn't want to stick my vendors.
Yeah. And then talk about radon real quick. Obviously, radon still a hot topic. The one thing that kind of came and went for me that I wanted to see if any of y'all had heard anything about, I'd say probably about 3-4 years ago, there was all of a sudden a trend of if you're getting a radon test done and it comes up positive, then you should probably get a radon water test done on the private well, because apparently radon can come in your water. So I had a house out in north Raleigh that tested positive for radon. This was during that time. So I said, we really need to get that tested. It ended up having radon gas in the well as well. So I haven't heard much more about that. I don't know if it's still a thing. Obviously, just from that experience, I know it exists, but I don't, you know, if it's a cost prohibitive test or there's just companies that aren't doing it. Have you heard anything about it ever?
Not really. The most unique thing I've seen with radon is that it was in the granite in the home.
Mhm.
So, that is something. I had a condo and it was one of those where they were just like, yeah, order all the inspection. I was like, check. And it came back with radon. I was like, well, color me confused. And I talked to the home inspector and it was in the granite
That's so confusing. Like, how is it in the granite?
because it's a rock.
It exists
Radon
in the
comes-
granite. Yeah. Yeah, so every granite countertop in America is emitting
Some,
a very, very, very tiny amount.
this one just had a very, very high level of wherever they got the granite from.
Yeah, and just
So-
know that if you aren't pushing radon tests, I could be
It's the
sitting here and
nuance.
test positive for radon in this house, and April could be my next door neighbor and not have it. It's literally my next door neighbor sold their house, not with me, but that's a different subject.
That's for next week
Yeah.
in the listing
Yeah,
presentation.
yeah. And sure enough, one day I saw the radon truck out there and I'm like, oh, you know, I had mine tested when we moved in, but I was just like, oh, that's interesting. But no rhyme or reason it could exist at 10 houses in the neighborhood and the next 10 it doesn't. I had one off Timber Drive in Garner. I've had it, you know, just no rhyme or reason. So definitely make sure you're pushing the radon test.
So I want to add something that y'all.
I'm just going to stop you.
Yeah.
Can we just have people ask questions?
Yeah.
With, in Fayetteville, because I'm from Fayetteville and that's where I do most of my business even still, but I live in Fayetteville. We have something called Gen X.
Oh, my
And
gosh.
so Gen X had actually migrated. It was first found in Wilmington, like it was something big in the news where a couple kids had died from Gen X. And I mean, they're small children, like 4 and 5. So it's like it affects you so quickly,
Mhm,
you know, and it's found in well water.
mhm.
But really it's because of a plant that's nearby that kind
Yeah.
of releases it into the air. So now it's like this big thing where it's just not well water. It goes into the air so it can affect your crops and plants if you are planting something and go into the ground and affect everybody in different ways. But mostly if you're in an area like say Grace Creek area, which is still considered, might be considered Hope Mills, but we go by zip codes in Fayetteville. So if I see a house and it's a certain zip code and it has well water, I'm already gonna tell my client, like, it's a possibility that this is the case. And when it is the case at one house, it is gonna be the neighboring houses. It's not, you know, secluded to that one. And what they generally do is you may have to pay a lot of money to get somebody to come out there and test it. It may take months, so that's gonna hold up your closing. But once they test it, if the city is able to do it, or the town or county, they'll go to the neighboring within a certain radius and do those free of charge for those people, just to see how far to go and where it stops. But it is a pretty like serious and terrible thing, and they got lawsuits that's just waiting, you know, and it's like something that I don't even get into. So if somebody's like, I want a house, I'm gonna say, okay, well, this is what's going on with Gen X right now. So do you want me to exclude all the well waters, you know?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, go ahead, do that. I don't have to worry about that ever, you know?
And there is a Gen X disclosure statement that is circulating in the Fayetteville and Hope Mill area. And there is a company that will come out, if it does test positive for Gen X, they will put a filtration system in. It's a middle of the road system and it at no cost to the buyer. However, we had issues with our clients, like, I don't want the middle of the road. I want the highest, the $10,000 system, not the $2,000 system. So make sure they're aware that even though it's being remediated, not everyone is happy with that. And I've seen the same thing with radon, that it pops just a little and we're like, okay, all we really need is some vents or a ventilation system. And they're like, I want a full blown radon mitigation system. And again, you're talking the difference from $350 to $3,500
Yeah.
and drilling holes in the side of the house and things like that.
Yeah.
So anybody ever seen that white radon pipe coming out of the side of the house? If you ever see a random pipe coming out of the side and you're like, wonder where that goes to? More than likely there's a radon mitigation system and you need to ask about it. So if you go and bless you a listing appointment, it almost looks like a big version of the roof plumbing boots that
Yep.
you see on the top, but it's
It'll go all the way up to the side and it'll have the cap right above the roof.
yes.
So this goes all the way up?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because basically the idea is that it's pulling out of the crawl space or under the slab, pulling that gas and then releasing it above the house, basically,
Okay.
into the atmosphere. So it's not, basically, the house isn't encapsulating it anymore. It's not.
And
Okay.
it's one of those things that the sellers 9 times out of 10 completely forget that they have. They're used to seeing it. They probably did it when they bought the house and they completely forget it's there. And you're like, any issues? And they're like, nah. You're filling out the RPD, and then later the home inspector comes and like, well, you got a radon mitigation system. You're like, really? Is that what that is? And then the seller's like, ah.
One thing I wanted to comment on about what you were just talking about, little sidebar, let me get on my soapbox. Please, please, please. And I've fell victim to it as well. I get a call from somebody, hey, I want to go look at a house in Fayetteville, or I want to go look at a house here or there. And I'm like, all right, sure, I'm only an hour away. Please, please, please know the areas that you were showing buyers. I had no idea. So I could have a friend call me today and I could run down to that zip code and write a contract today, and I would have never even thought about looking for any type of Gen X chemicals or having that test or advising that buyer like that. So please stay in your lane, know your areas, frontwards and backwards.
I've never heard of that
Mhm.
either,
Yeah.
obviously. Maybe because I don't go to Fayetteville, but is that just well water? Is that where it's?
Yeah, technically, that's where it is focused, is well water. So any property that has well water is
You would wanna
generally,
get it
it's,
tested.
yeah, you want to get it tested. Or know that it has, a lot of times, if they're listing something, the seller's already done it, it's a selling point to present that information.
Mhm.
So you might see that in the document saying like, it only has this much, this is not enough to cause any effect, but that may still scare some buyers of even one, even if it has a little bit. And those filtration systems, they bring your, what is the word? If the water pressure is lower. So when you have a filtration system, now your showers are not gonna hit, like, it's not gonna hit you as good as you would, or the water is gonna pour out a little bit slower. And so that's something too that people can't, that people don't wanna deal with. But now we're finding that the gases are being released from this nearby plant. And so it is affecting, it's dropping in the rainwater.
That's
It's gonna
insane.
affect if you're growing something in a garden, it's gonna affect those things that you eat. So it's more than just well. So even if you don't have well water, it is still going to come into your system if you are within a certain vicinity of the plant, which the plant is near that 28306 area. And so if you're around that in a certain radius.
So it's coming from an actual plant,
Mhm.
Yes,
there in the Fayetteville
Yes.
area or whatever.
yes.
Interesting.
And
Did you say it started in Wilmington?
Yeah, so I think there's another plant in Wilmington, but yeah, it started in.
Is that the name of the plant, Gen X? I mean.
No.
that's the name of the,
Chemical.
yeah,
It's,
I can't think of the
they
name.
make like.
Hold on.
So DuPont?
Yes.
Yep, DuPont.
Yes,
Yep.
DuPont.
But on the
So why
same,
aren't they not, like, why isn't somebody getting involved in?
oh, they are. It's Aaron Brockovich in down there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just realized.
I wanna be there.
Sorry.
The
Yeah.
crazy thing is that they have, so, there are some places in 28306, because it's a big zip code, that have city water, but those are in city limits. The ones that aren't in city limits, it's like some sort of regulation where they just cannot give them city water. And we're just thinking like, solve this issue, give them city water, create some lines, create a tap. And it's like so much bigger than how easy we.
I will say it's harder to run water and sewer than people realize. You have to have capacity, water plants, all the things, and
Yeah.
that's part of the issues is.
You gotta
they
have
don't
the right size piping
infrastructure. Yeah.
going to an area. If there's not even the right size piping, they won't even
Yeah.
approve building in an
I've
area.
learned way more about water and sewer than I ever wanted to know.
All right, let's,
Hold on, I want
Oh,
to stay
so
on
go
this
ahead.
for a second, because the other thing to keep in mind is because we are in such a rural area, same thing if you're selling a property that's near a hog farm or a regular farm, make sure they get a well test. So what questions do y'all have? What have y'all experienced when working in DDRA that has either been positive or negative? I've got one right now. Can you ask for the house to be cleaned and the carpets cleaned and everything in a DDRA?
No, that's an upgrade. That's an add-on.
You can ask, right?
Yeah, you can ask. And
Yeah.
the reason I asked that is because I had some clients questioning me on it. And they're like, well, it's not on the home inspection. It's not this. And I had another agent question me on it. And I said, well, I understand, but the whole point of this form is to negotiate anything that's important to my clients during the due diligence request. And I agree with you. It's an improvement. However, with this situation, the house was completely spotless when we showed it. We went back for the home inspection and it looks like they opened an SPCA in it. Like the
Yep.
carpets are nasty.
which would
dogs
go
are
against, it would
everywhere.
go against the contract anyways.
Exactly. So the house is not in the same or better
Right.
condition as it was when we saw it. So in that respect, I don't have any issues asking for that. Typically, you're right, I would have negotiated that up front.
Yeah, I
But
usually
it
put
was
that in
because
the
it
agree
was
to amend
a-
or additional provisions.
Yeah, I would have negotiated up front if it was something that was an expectation from the very beginning. But because when we saw it and it was spotless, and when we went back for the home inspection, it was a whole new world, literally smell and all, I was like, we're gonna put this in our GDRA.
Ooh, I've done that.
Said that it's contractual, sorry.
Yeah.
And I prepare my buyers, they're probably not gonna clean it like you do, they're probably not gonna have somebody clean it like you do, but at least we know that we're gonna get a receipt that somebody came in here and did it better than,
But that's, I mean, that's contractual anyways.
right.
Yeah,
So that's like a final walkthrough thing that we.
And that's always an issue, your clean versus mine.
Exactly, broom swept.
Like, this doesn't look clean, like, you know, but it's like.
Broom swept, does that include getting all the crumbs and the rat poop out of the cabinets? You know, I would think it does, but we've had this argument way too many times. The same thing with nail pops and things like that. So, yeah. What other questions or issues have you had? And I will also say, we keep saying the word due diligence. I would say to buyers your inspection period, because
Mhm.
we already talked about due diligence to them and it was a check
yeah.
and a period. And now we're saying due diligence again and they're like, what the heck?
That's what I was saying in the beginning of the deal, that sometimes they just look at you sideways when you say, dude, I don't even know what that is. What's due diligence?
I wish the real estate commission would quit using the same terms for the
Yeah.
same thing over and over and over, but
What term did you say you used?
Inspection period. So, yeah, we'll just kind of just keep on masterminding, keep
Okay.
on, like
Any
reviewing
questions?
documents. Anybody want to weigh in on Zoom? Like I said, we could hear you just like you could hear us. Feel free to jump on. Reviewing documents, please. And this is pertaining to covenants, HOA, stuff like that, the residential property owners disclosure statement. Obviously, the biggest thing is some of this stuff that they're listing that you should be doing as a buyer during the due diligence period, you can do for your buyer to prevent headaches and going under contract, that's something that's gonna be a deal breaker. Reviewing documents is one of those. So, you know, you have this conversation with a buyer. Most of the time, it's just a split of, I don't want to live in any HOA community. Or, hey, I'm looking for an HOA community, but the thing people don't understand is that if you're looking for a no HOA community, that does not necessarily mean that restrictive covenants don't exist still. Because 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, even of the, you know, the communities built way back when that, you know, the streets are orphaned and they don't have a working HOA, there was something recorded with Wake County or Johnson County by that builder of a just generic set of rules. And usually they're all about the same. And usually all of them say no livestock, unfortunately, because people want chickens. That's the big one that always comes up.
Mhm.
I want a no HOA community because I want to have chickens. Well, this is what's going on. I just went through with a buyer and I explained to them, this is no HOA community. I spoke with one of the closing attorneys and said, you know, just to make sure I'm understanding this, they can move into this community. And if they break one of these restrictive covenants, a homeowner in that community could sue them and make them take down the chicken house or whatever they're doing wrong that according to the covenants of that neighborhood. Has anybody ran into anything crazy like that? I'm sorry, one more thing that just made me remember. Same story. It was actually this way down 42, and I can't remember the name of the neighborhood. They wanted chickens. We pulled the covenants. The first time I've ever seen this in my life when I pulled covenants, it had an expiration date on the covenants of December of 2023. So I literally told them, well, you could have chickens now because there are no covenants. These people in this neighborhood, you know, in order to reinstate them, I think the attorney said they would need 80% of the homeownership to vote yes to reinstate the rules that those people have not been following or didn't know they had to follow to begin with.
Mhm.
Has anybody ran into an issue after or before, you know, that, hey, my buyer said, no, we're not going to purchase this house because of, you know, what they're saying, you know, in the restrictive covenants or HOA rules?
I had a farmland that had kind of that like 19 something, you know, where they had it and about horses and chickens and stuff, but the owner always had horses on the lot. It was off of Saul's Mill or Saul's Road
Yep.
or whatever. And everybody else, all the neighbors have horses
Mhm.
and everybody else. So it was one of those things that it wasn't enforced.
Yeah.
Since it was so
Yeah.
many years ago and everybody does it, so.
Yeah, I mean, and most of the time, it's not gonna be enforced because there's no governing
There's not a
body
governing body,
to enforce it, and the neighbors, half the neighbors probably don't even know those exist to begin with, so that's good. So that's something we can knock out prior to going under contract, so we're not losing a due diligence fee because come to find out, they're not gonna be able to have chickens. Just make sure you're letting them know up front, though. It still may have restrictive covenants, still a risk involved, and if you wanna move forward with whatever project that's gonna break the covenants, somebody still could say, hey, that's not right, but usually you could stand in that same neighborhood and point around to all the other houses that have things that are, paying the, attention to the rules.
Just a quick question, has anybody ever heard of or been involved with a situation where a homeowner did sue somebody in a neighborhood because they broke a restrictive covenant when there was no longer a HOA? Like, has it actually happened?
Typically what happens is they call the county and try to get the county ordinance group to come out and they will fine them. If they find that they are in the county ordinance will give them fines and penalties.
Because they broke their neighborhood's restrictive covenant, it's not because they broke the county ordinance.
Sometimes, yeah, depending on what it is. I mean, it's probably, if it was like you can't have a flag that's purple, then the county is gonna be like, but if it's something major like vehicles, things like that, then they will have something to say about it. Another thing, make sure you are reading the surveys for your clients. It is not the attorney's job to read and explain the survey to your clients. I've told this horror story before, but I had a new construction situation where the buyer's agent was just very not involved, never came to the walkthroughs, never did anything, did not come to closing, and the buyers got a survey, and it was a 30-foot monument sign easement in the front yard, and they had no knowledge of it. And 2 months after they closed, there was a development going behind the neighborhood that they knew about. They just didn't know the development sign was literally going to be in their front yard. Nobody ever told them. It was not my, I mean, I was the listing agent. I provided them the information and they had a survey done. It was on the survey, clear as day. And the buyer's agent wasn't there to read the survey to them. And so they had no idea. And then they called my builder mad and I was like, we made this very apparent from day one. And it was on the fault of the buyer's agent for not making sure that they saw it.
Quick question, why would the builder have drawn a lot or let it be that way to begin with?
Because we developed the first 2 lots before the land was sold to somebody else behind us, and we had an easement, and the same builder was developing it, and so he did want that monument sign there. He owned the same lot, ended up selling it to another developer, so it was a long story, but regardless, it was there on the original plat.
Yeah. So yeah, surveys, once again, that's always the one that they try to kick the can down the road on, my buyers all the time. We go through all these other things and they're like, oh, they wrote all this checks and they're just like, oh, you know what? Do I really
I'll
need a
just get out
survey?
there with my metal detector and
Do I
find
really
the-
need a survey? Well, horror stories. I had a buyer, luckily we got a survey. The current owner had built a fence on the back of the property that was 50 feet of the fence that was 60 feet long, was on the farm behind them's over the boundary line, so they had to redo that. I'll with my tail tucked, I didn't get a survey when I purchased my current house because all of the fences, backyards were all connected. So I was like, well, they're all there. You know what? Come to find out, 2 or 3 years prior, a tornado came through, tore down most of the fences, they got rebuilt. My fence was 3 inches over the line this way and 3 inches over the line that way. So when the buyer's agent called me and said, hey, Mr. Bonham, you just purchased such and such, I just want to let you know there's a encroachment of the fence. And I said, yeah, I'm not going to tell you I'm a real estate agent and I didn't get a survey. So, easy thing. It wasn't anything crazy. We just had a encroachment agreement filed with the county. So sometimes it's something as small as that. But sometimes it could be as large as, hey, moving a shed, or, hey, we're going to dig up your garden here because there's a utility easement going through it and stuff like that. So.
You said the utility easement. My house is a new build. My realtor that I use did not tell me that because I purchased on an outside lot, because I didn't want neighbors behind me, that my last 20 feet was not allowed to be fenced in. So I lost 20 feet of my property across the whole stretch. Luckily, it's a big lot, but
Yeah.
She didn't tell me that, and I had no idea to find that out.
Yeah.
So that was something that I know going into this now, I would want to watch that for anybody buying either on an already established house or
Yeah.
a new lot, check that for them, because I know how soft I was
Yeah.
to find out I just lost 20 feet of my property.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the other good part about it is that that is the one thing during due diligence that if they find issues, it has to be rectified, no ifs, ands, or buts from the seller.
And-
So if there's an encroachment, there's something wrong, there's a fence or a shed, or it clouds the title, does not make for a clean title, the seller has to fix it because part of the offer to purchase contract says the seller has to provide a clean title.
Or you can do a variance.
Well, but that's what I'm saying, but it's
you're
not
right.
something, so when you are telling them that they have to cut this check, well, the good news is if we do find thing, they're pretty much
Exactly.
have to fix it. So that's the one thing,
You disclose it, there's an encroachment agreement.
Yes.
yeah, you're good
fine.
there. I'm just saying as far as,
It's
well, I
one of
don't wanna
those
spend
things
this
that-
$600. Well, if you find out after the fact, it may cost you more. So let's just,
It's one of the things that can fall back on the seller as a contractual obligation that they could be in breach if they don't fix it because it's something, even if they weren't aware of it, but it's something that creates a title issue for the buyer. Let's talk about best practices for the DDRA because we are running out of
Yeah.
time. So, on the listing side, we want to see DDRAs that are very clear. Please send me the inspection report. You only really have to send the summary, but I want to see the whole report as well. You will notice that pretty much every agent has been trained to say, have a licensed contractor fix this, this, and this. I completely agree with that. Make sure when you're negotiating that you're negotiating the intention. So almost all the DDRAs I get say, make sure a licensed contractor, evaluates, or I don't like to use the word evaluate. I say repair or replace. And sometimes we look at it and it's like, okay, there's lint in the dryer vent. This does not have to be done by a contractor. So when I negotiate back, I say seller will, or whoever will. Because if it comes to me and it says contractor to, and I go back at the end of the day and my seller did it, we have breached the DDRA because they signed that a contractor would do it. And we all know I don't need a contractor to clean out a vent, but we agreed to have a contractor do it. And I have had some buyers just willing to die on that hill over some very small things. It's like, well, you said you'd have a contractor. I'm like, my favorite is a licensed roofing contractor. How many of y'all know a licensed roof? There's no such thing as a roofing license. But they want to have a licensed roofing contractor. And I'm like, so a roofer came out. And like, were they licensed? I'm like, so a roofer came out because there is.
I had a similar pushback where, we sent over a repair request, same thing, everything was verbiage of contractor this, contractor that. My seller knocked out 5 things on the list because they were simple, loose outlet, stuff that, okay, so sent it back with, the response was, oh, these have already been taken care of. And they were like, well, invoices, and I'm like, for that? And I said, look, the repairs have been made. You have more than the opportunity to review those repairs to make sure they're to your liking or whatever, the good workman-like manner. But, for simple stuff like that, and my seller, he was like, I'm not gonna hire somebody to do that. But obviously we don't want the seller out there making repairs to the HVAC system, stuff
Right.
like that. So I can understand where there needs to be a line drawn where we don't want Uncle Charlie,
Yeah.
because he used to work for, ABC HVAC 20 years ago. He's gonna juice this thing back up with some Freon
Freon.
for us.
So that,
So I'm trying to be clear, you're saying before you sign the DDRA, you respond back and go ahead and acknowledge what your seller is going to do. What the seller is going to do versus the contractor.
right. However, the items are going to be handled, I respond back. So if it's going to be done by a contractor, I'm like, contractor will. If it's my seller is going to take care of it, I notate that the seller will, and I negotiate back that way so that there's no confusion. The same thing goes with when you're asking for receipts. So for instance, I'm dealing with one right now. There was a small gas leak. My sellers went ahead and took care of it. They're like, no problem. We took care of the gas leak. I was like, great. Did the gas company give you a receipt? No, they didn't charge me for it. I'm like, well, I can't wait to explain to this buyer, trust us. The gas company came out, said all was good. Especially with something like that. And I'm like, well, they're like, well, we don't want to come back out here. I don't know that you're supposed to fix it. And I'm like, I hear you. But I want you to put yourself in the buyer's shoes. We were talking about a gas leak here that was identified, verified that it was a gas leak. And the gas company was like, good news, fixed it. All I need is an email from somebody saying, good news, fixed it. Because I trust you, but guess who's not going to trust us?
Yeah.
So go ahead and set the expectations if you're working on the seller side. If you start doing any work to this house, because a lot of times, as soon as you send them the inspection report, here's what happens. Send them the inspection report, because some agents, I love it when a buyer agent goes ahead and sends me the inspection report, because the sellers, they're pacing. As soon as the inspection, they're like, what'd they say? I'm like, I don't know. And some agents take 8 days because they want to do their own quotes
Estimates
and
yeah,
estimates and everything. I'm like, I hear you, but at least let me know what we're working with so we can go ahead and start having this conversation. Again, this is where I'm excited. I feel like real estate is going to get more back to relationship based than it ever has been before. But anyway, I'm like, go ahead and send it so I can start having these conversations, because there may be things that we are not aware of, or there may be things we are aware of that we can give you reasoning behind. And so that's the only thing I hate, is when they wait to the last minute and they send you this long request, and now we have to go get repaired, or we have to go get estimates and things like that, because now you've said that contractors have to fix everything. So I think if there's communication throughout the whole thing, it is easier on everybody. But what I was saying was, a lot of times an agent will go ahead and send me the inspection request or inspection report because I've asked for it, and my sellers jump on it. And I'm like, no. Before you jump on anything,
Let's see what they want.
let's
Yeah.
see what they're asking for. I appreciate you being proactive, but they may be very specific on how they want things fixed. Or who they want to fix it. My dad is an electrician. If I get an inspection report, don't touch anything electrical. I want my dad to fix it. I know it's going to be done right.
Yeah.
Versus, like you said, Uncle Charlie, is going to do this, that, and the other.
And then on the
So-
flip side, as the buyer agent, I've found on our side, the best practices where I've had a lot of positive results is, instead of sending over that list of repairs, send over a dollar amount. Because 9 times out of 10, that seller all of a sudden is going to feel that burden lift off their shoulders, that they're not sending me this punch list, but they're sending me, and it may require going out and getting some quotes. And it may require some further negotiation, but I've always had success when we just say, hey, look,
Give me a
this,
$1,000.
and this is wrong. If you agree to this number at closing, we could just put this all past us. And because the seller's in the middle of moving, the seller's in the middle of doing all this stuff, they don't want to add a repair list to their plate. So,
And the buyers want to wait.
exactly. And that's
Exactly.
where
Or
I
the
say,
people that
we
they want to.
control
Uh-huh.
then after closing who we have, or the buyer has fixed it, rather than, like I said, the seller. Because if you were having your home fixed for somebody getting ready to buy it, who are you gonna get to fix it?
Mhm.
The cheapest person you can find that will give you a receipt and say it's fixed. So,
Chris May, one of our favorite attorneys, he said, always, always, always negotiate concessions. He said, when you get to the closing table, it's not the attorney's job to help you remediate whether or not repair is in good workmanlike manner.
Yeah.
That is a very, very, very gray area. And there's no need in putting out that stress on both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, Melinda.
I was just gonna say, I think if more agents on both sides, listing and buy side, like when I sit down with sellers, I let them know they're right up front, their house isn't perfect like they think it is.
oh yeah,
And I also give them that expectation. An inspector's gonna find something, I don't care what it is, and if your light bulb's out, they're gonna literally say, you need an electrician for this,
Yes.
right? And it's a light bulb.
how did this?
So I try to have them go through on things to, the obvious stuff, but even on the buyer side, I let them know that as well. Like, the inspection report's gonna come back in, it's gonna be scary. But again, it's another negotiation thing. I think if agents explain both sides for the seller and the buyer on it, it puts that tension down, because when they do see that report, it's not like,
Yeah.
oh my God, what is this? And they
Yeah.
already, you had that conversation with them.
I negotiated recently a buyer, we got him down $15,000. We got him under contract, $15,000 under the list price. Right before we're getting ready to get everything signed, the mom weighs in and goes, what, there was outlet covers missing. Oh, okay. There's outlet covers missing in the bedroom and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just thinking, we just got $15,000 off the list price. We can take care of some outlet covers, I promise, Yeah, I will buy outlet covers for you. So it's, like you said, expectations are big. I always preach that, setting expectations so you're not blindsiding either side. And like you said, I'm sorry,
No, you're good.
the sellers always think their house is perfect.
Another good thing, and I know we're almost out of time, but, and I just lost that train of thought. It was what you were just talking about. Oh, keep up while you're working on your buyer presentations, improving your value, just like you keep up with how much you get, on the listing side, how much you get your sellers ever asking, keep up with how much you're negotiating on behalf of your buyers, so that you can say, my buyers average, getting an additional 4% off of these houses because of my negotiation skills, whether it's in price or repair
Yeah.
negotiations. So keep a spreadsheet of all your negotiations so you can have those numbers available. Again, proving your value. Yes, it may cost you this to use me as your agent, but wouldn't it be worth it if I just made you $15,000
Yeah,
or saved you $15,000?
yep.
So,
Awesome.
any other questions?
Any questions from anybody?
Thank y'all for coming. Any questions on Zoom before we stop?
Any questions from Zoom, Lance?
More.
Appreciate y'all hanging out
Next week is listing presentations. I'll
with
be here.
our superstar listing agent in the building.
Justin.
Justin's gonna be here doing that. And you guys, if you don't have your CE, Real School's up and running, check out the realschoolnc.com, check out our calendar. We got gen ups, bic ups, electives, both in person and virtual. So come hang out with us. Awesome.
He's doing all hours of the day and
Yeah,
night. So you're
absolutely.
you've
I'm
got one
covering-
tonight, 5
Yep.
to 10, I think, or
Yeah,
5 to 9.
6 to 10, but we may be moving that up a little earlier because,
So the cool thing is we have flexibility.
yes, we do. Yes, we do. So,
There's
awesome.
only a few of y'all in the class. Keith is not canceling them. He's
No.
making them happen.
Yep.
And
Thank y'all for hanging out.
thank you.
Kate, if you moved it up, how early